Okay, so the question is it ever okay to have a non-shepherding pastor or elder in the sense that he doesn't do visitation, he's not really involved in people's lives, the church is so large that he's just kind of the ivory tower, come out, do the stage production and go back. Let me start out with this one because I do pastor a large church. It is a multi-campus church, and there are several thousand people there. And my answer to that is absolutely not. It's never okay to have a non-shepherding pastor because you can't just separate those offices that God has joined together. Now, having said that, I think it can look different and you can still be a faithful pastor in those things. I realize now that in many ways my primary role of pastoring is I'm a pastor of pastors. And those pastors are working with people. And in fact, in many ways, I feel like our church is better pastored now than when I was kind of the sole focus. And I think that's okay. I think the multiplication of leaders is a concept that's taught throughout the New Testament, and I think you can do that. Having said that, I don't ever want to let myself be content with just pastoring leaders. So I maintain, for example, a small group that has couples in it that are very new to the faith, a couple that doesn't even go to our church that are not believers. And so, I will take some counseling each week. I will try to do some visitation. It's not what it used to be when our church was really small, but you've heard it said probably that your sermon ends up sounding like the people that you talk to that week. If all I talk to are our pastors, I end up preaching to them. I need, for my own ministry's sake, I need to be a shepherd. So,
yeah. Well, you said these duties and gifts are wed in the Scripture of shepherding by caring for people individually as well as proclaiming the word to them. And when Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 2 and verse 8, we delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. You recognize that there is that no credibility if there's not also life involvement. So there really is no preaching if there is not heart connection with the person as well. What you say is not connecting with me. Now, having said that, we know there are different gifts and different degrees of calling to the shepherding aspects versus the proclamation aspects. And large churches, different stages of life, different personalities, you'll have different mixes of those gifts. But because you two are half generation down from me, let me just kind of test and see where you all are. I find we're talking Gospel Coalition guys. A lot of them are young pastors. And that means a lot of them come from both families and churches at which pastoral shepherding visitation did not occur. It's not their life experience. So they enter pastoral situations, and not only are they not thinking about visitation, shepherding, and pastoring, they actually think it's unfair to be asked. I'm so busy, I'm so pressed, I'm so pushed. Why are you putting this additional burden on me? Now, that's my perception of having taught at a seminary for about 3 decades and finding young guys changing in those 3 decades. Earliest generation, when I was there, people used to visitation of a pastor, used to pastors being in their home or hospital room. Present generation of guys, not accustomed to that at all, and therefore they do not perceive it as part of the pastoral task. Now, is that just my experience, or do you reflect on that at all in what you have gone through?
No, I think that's right. I think even just the cultural changes, people aren't used to having people in their homes. And so there are times when, people have said to me, why are you here? They're a little confused by, when you ask, can I come over and just spend some time and pray with you? And that's uncomfortable for people because they're just not used to having people in their homes. But yeah, I think certainly, I think in our generation, that is a different task. I think we're used to seeing successful pastors have really large churches, are a little, more disconnected from the body. And so, yeah, it seems like the sort of sleepy little town pastor that still goes out.
None of us know who wrote these questions, I don't think. Do any of you? I don't know. But I actually wonder if there wasn't some wisdom in that, given kind of the demographic of who we're talking to, is to say, you know what? This is still part of the pastoral task.
Right.
And it may not have been your experience, but we're all kind of affirming that aspect of shepherding is part of being the proclaimer as well. Yeah. And whoever asked the question, I think, was thinking about the demographic of who we're talking to.
Yeah, I think it's good to know your own personality and kind of work against your weaknesses and sort of, so I'm a little bit introverted naturally. I get energy by being by myself. So I know I would love to be alone with my books all day and write a sermon. And so for me, just knowing I'm going to need to work really hard, make sure I'm pressing into people. You're not going to find me sort of regretful that I didn't spend enough time preparing for my sermon, but I might not spend enough time with people. And so for me, having elders around me who are keeping me accountable to that, guys who know how I'm spending my time, just organizing my week to make sure that that's a regular part of my sort of pastoral ministry, has been important. I remember a professor in seminary said the reason why all you guys go and do PhDs is because books are a lot easier to love than people. And so that's always just stuck in my head to think, okay, I don't want my pastoral ministry to be primarily about books.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as a pastor of a church that's, where there's just too many people to pastor, I got, or too many people to be involved, one-on-one, to Richard Baxter to catechize their kids in their home, is that I got paralyzed for a while because I knew I couldn't be a pastor to everybody, being a pastor of really nobody. Mm-hmm. And there is that, whether it's your personality or whether it's just being overwhelmed at the task, I think that you see that gravitational pull. And I would repeat your counsel to fight against that, because you won't be half the preacher that you ought to be if you're not individually involved in people's lives. Now, having said that, maybe one word of balance, of moderation. I realize that one of the greatest acts of service I can give to my people is to make sure that I'm prepared when I teach them the Word. So I've had to, I think there's some wisdom in setting some boundaries, where you say, I've got to devote myself to this, and I'm going to have to teach the deacons how to wait on tables so that, I can do this. So I think there's some balance, but I think, like you said, Brian, there's some wisdom in even the question. You got a final word for us?
No, I was learning from you all. Some of you all know I'm going back into a pastoral ministry after 30 years in seminary training, so I'm learning from you. and thinking, I've even said to what you just said, JD, I said, I can't pastor everybody. But I have to start being in the homes of my elders. I have to start being in the homes of my deacons. I have to start being in the homes of my fellow pastors. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm going to try to start. And I'm learning from you all, just because I'm deeply convinced that you cannot just sit in your study and preach great sermons and think that's going to be healthy for the church.
Well, then write the book and we'll all buy it.
I'll find out.